In our last lesson, we read the myth Demeter and Persephone. There were lots of Greek gods and goddesses that were in that myth. There will also be a Greek goddess that you will recognize in our myth today. Today's read aloud is called Arachne the Weaver. A weaver is someone who combines strands of thread or yarn in an alternating pattern in order to make cloth. An arachnid belongs to a class of animals that are carnivorous and have a two-segmented body, 8 legs, and no antenna or wings. Today's myth will explain how one animal in nature was first created. Take a minute to make a prediction about what animal this myth might describe. Before we find out if your predictions are true, let's go over our vocabulary words. Our first one is superior. Superior means higher in position or quality. Alice felt that the pie she had made was superior to her sister's. Stern. Stern means harsh, firm, or strict. Their grandmother gave them a stern warning that they were to look both ways before crossing the street. Flattered. If you flatter someone, that means that you compliment them. The teacher flattered Juliet by praising her performance on the multiplication test. A synonym is a word that means the same thing. See if you can think of a synonym for flattered. What's a word that means the same thing? Some words you could have used, some synonyms for flattered include praised, complimented, or admired. Long ago, there lived among the Greeks a young woman named Arachne, who was a very gifted weaver. A weaver weaves or spins threads or yarns together to make cloth. Arachne wove upon a wooden frame called a loom. She did not just weave solid colors, she wove tapestries, wonderful woven pictures that people would hang on their walls as art. People came from distant lands to see these masterpieces in Arachne's studio. A visitor might comment, "This is amazing! Why, look at the leaves on this tree. They look so real that you almost expect them to move in the breeze. And this deer in the meadow looks as if he is going to turn and bound away." The visitors would tell Arachne, "You are the finest weaver in all the world." But then they would add, except of course for the goddess Athena, who invented weaving. Athena was actually the goddess of all handicrafts, not just weaving. People flattered Arachne by comparing her work to that of Athena's. At first, Arachne was pleased with this comparison, but as years passed, she began to get annoyed. She would say, "I'm sure Athena is very talented, but look, did you see this one that I made over here?" As still more years passed, whenever people compared her to the goddess, Arachne would angrily say, "I don't care if Athena invented weaving. I think I am the best weaver in the world." Do you think this bragging might cause a problem for Arachne? Word of this eventually reached the ears of the goddess Athena on Mount Olympus. She decided to visit Arachne's studio to learn if Arachne was truly saying such things. However, Athena did not want Arachne to recognize her, so with her magic, Athena changed her appearance from a beautiful athletic young woman. Now, with a wave of her hand and a puff of smoke, gone was the young woman, replaced by a woman so old and bent with age that she had to lean on a walking stick to get around. Of course, inside that body was still the goddess Athena, but no one would have recognized her. In this disguise, she went to visit Arachne, commenting, "Your work is extraordinary, my dear. I am certain that you are the finest weaver in the world. Except, of course, for the goddess Athena." Hearing this, Arachne, thinking she spoke to a bent old woman, angrily exclaimed, "I am sick of hearing about Athena. I say that I am the best weaver in the world." Well, there was a puff of smoke, and when it blew away, who did Arachne see standing there with her but the beautiful goddess Athena? Arachne was afraid of what the goddess might do to her, but she took a deep breath and said, "I meant what I said. I am prepared to prove that I am the best. I have 2 wooden looms for weaving. You use one, and I shall use the other. Let us see once and for all who is the best." So the goddess and the young woman chose their colors and started to weave. When at last they stopped, Arachne grinned, for she truly believed that she had won. She pointed out all of the wonderful features of her work to the goddess. "Look," she said, "see how real the stream looks tumbling down this hillside, and how the water reflects the colors of the sunlight as real water would do? And if you move over here to look, the colors actually change, the way real sunlight would change." At last, she turned to see Athena's tapestry. Arachne saw at once that the work of the goddess was even finer than her own. Athena had woven a stream, but hers seemed to ripple and move. She had woven clouds that appeared to float lightly in the sky, and above it all, she had woven the gods in all of their majesty. Upset and embarrassed, Arachne turned and ran from the room. Athena caught up with her, asking, "Where are you going?" Arachne exclaimed, "I thought I was the best, but you are superior, and no matter how long and hard I work at it, I will never be as good as you are. I shall never weave again." Then Athena grew stern. Everyone is born with some special gift or talent, if only he or she can figure out what it is and how to use it. You must not waste this skill of yours. We shall see to it that you shall weave again. She reached out and touched Arachne's shoulder with the tip of one finger. Instantly, Arachne began to change shape. She grew smaller and smaller, and her body rounder and rounder. Her legs and arms grew longer and thinner until after about 5 minutes, Arachne had turned into the very first spider in the world. Today, we call all members of the spider family arachnids, and that is why some people say all spiders are the children of Arachne the Weaver. What do spiders weave? Spiders weave webs. Why did Athena turn Arachne into a spider rather than a different kind of animal? She wanted Arachne to use her gift of weaving, so she turned her into a spider so that she would be weaving all day still. In our read aloud today, we heard the following sentence. She pointed out all of the wonderful features of her work to the goddess. Features means interesting or important parts of something. This new book has many nice features, such as beautiful pictures, a helpful table of contents, and a list of all of the maps included in it. I want you to take a look around, whatever room you are in now, and pick any item. See if you can list some of the important features of that item. What about a school? What are some important features of a school? What important parts are in a school? Schools have students and teachers Schools also have walls and desks and books and windows. There are lots of features you could have listed for schools.
Alright, I want you to imagine for a minute that you are Arachne. How do you think you would feel about your work constantly being compared to Athena's? Do you think that would be very flattering? Do you think you would be as jealous as Arachne was? In our story, Arachne challenged Athena in a weaving contest. How did our story end? It ended with Athena turning Arachne into a spider. What in nature does this myth explain? This myth explains how the very first spider came to be. According to this myth, who was it that created the very first spider? It was the goddess Athena. Do you think that's really how the first spider was created? Or do you think that this story was fiction? And how do you know? Some ways we know this story was fiction was that there were things that happened in this story that could not happen in real life. And the story featured a supernatural character. Our supernatural character was the goddess Athena, who is immortal and has magical powers. Do you think there's a lesson to be learned from this myth? Turn and tell whoever is helping you today, what do you think the lesson or moral of this myth is? In the story, we talked about how in the end, Athena turned Arachne into a spider. Why do you think that she turned her into a spider and not a different kind of creature? Alright, my friends, for our assignment today, we are going to spin a story. In our story, Arachne spun tapestries. Remind me what a tapestry is? A tapestry is a woven image that can be hung up on walls. Many tapestries depict parts of a story. Today, we are going to make our own tapestries about the story of Arachne and Athena. To do this, we'll have to do separate drawings of the parts of our story and find a way to weave them together. There are lots of different ways that you can do today's assignment. I will attach a PDF that has blank papers that you can draw digitally on. You can use papers at home. You can do full-size papers or half-size papers or any size papers to do your parts of a story on. Or you can use just one regular paper and draw lines on it to split it into pieces, into different sections of the story. If you choose to do separate papers, to weave them together, you could punch holes in them and use thread to literally weave them together. You could use a stapler or glue or tape, any way you can to weave this story together. Let's talk about the parts of our story before we get started on making those drawings or depicting those images. What happened at the very beginning of our story? What was the first part of our story about? I'm going to write a number 1. In the first part of our story, we learned about Arachne, and how she was a very talented weaver who wove beautiful tapestries. What was in the second part of our story? Arachne wove beautiful tapestries in the first part of our story, and we learned that she was very popular. What happened next? Remember, Arachne said that she was better than even Athena, who was a master weaver. So Athena put on a disguise so she could go look at Arachne's work. What was her disguise? An old woman. She disguised herself as an old woman. What happened next in our story? Arachne wove beautiful tapestries and bragged about how she was better than even Athena. So then, Athena disguised herself as an old woman so she could look at Arachne's tapestries. Number 3. Then, in the next part of our story, Arachne first one, that one's a little hard to see. There we go. Found out that the old woman was Athena. I'm going to say she was surprised. She was surprised when she saw the old woman. It was really Athena. Do you think Arachne was a little nervous when she saw that it was actually Athena? I think I would have been nervous, but Arachne wasn't nervous. She challenged Athena, remember? In our next part, they had a contest. Where they both wove tapestries to see who was truly the best tapestry weaver. And how did our story end? What was the very last thing that happened? Our last thing that happened was that Athena turned Arachne into a spider. Athena turned Arachne into a spider. Those are all of the parts. We'll step back so you can see all of the things that happened in our story. Here, I'll go on this side. Arachne wove beautiful tapestries and was very proud of them. She's even proud enough to say that she was better than even Athena. So Athena disguised herself as an old woman to come see the tapestries and hear what Arachne was saying. Arachne was surprised when she realized that the old woman was actually the goddess Athena. They had a weaving contest to see who was truly the better weaver. And at the end, Athena turned Arachne into a spider. While you're weaving this story or spinning this story, you should have one picture for each section of the story. So 5 pictures total. You can weave them together however you would like. It could all be on one paper and just separated by lines like a comic book. You could glue your papers together. You could staple them together or weave them with thread, however you would like to complete this. You can also do this digitally. Again, there will be a PDF with blank pages attached to it where you can draw your pictures digitally and weave them together that way. When you are done, take a picture of your woven story or tapestry about Arachne and Athena, or digitally turn it in if you've done a digital one, and upload your pictures to Google Classroom or to the through the Kami assignment if you're doing the digital one, and you are done with knowledge to date.